Okay, tonight we are going to have two debates. The first debate is between candidates for Connecticut State Senate, District 36. The debaters are State Senator Scott France and Democratic challenger Alex Bergstein. This debate will be approximately 45 minutes. The second debate will include candidates for two House districts. For the 150th House District, the debaters are Representative Mike Pacino and Democratic challenger Steve Meskers. And the candidates for the 151st House District are Representative Fred Camillo and Democratic challenger Laura Custon. Sorry. This debate will be approximately 75 minutes. Our moderator is Kay Maxwell. Kay has served as president of both the League of Women Voters of Connecticut and the League of Women Voters of the United States. It is an honor to have her as our moderator. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you. Take a seat. Thank you very much, everyone. And as I indicated earlier, our purpose this evening is to provide everyone with an opportunity to hear the candidates' views on the issues that are facing Greenwich and the state. As I also mentioned, Channel 79 is broadcasting this debate live, and they are videotaping it for replay. So we would sincerely appreciate it if everyone who has a chair could stay in that chair during the course of the debate so that there's no interruption of the debate itself. As I mentioned earlier also, please, if you would be no clapping or that sort of thing, since it just takes time away from our debate and our opportunity to hear from the candidates. Now, the format that we're using this evening is designed to allow the candidates time to discuss the issues. The only rule is that the total time used by each candidate by the conclusion of the debate be approximately the same. I'm going to be posing the questions which have come from the League and from you in the audience. The candidates will not be restricted to 1 or 2 minute responses. Instead, they can spend as much time, as I said, as they feel appropriate to discuss each issue, because our goal is to encourage debate. Now, the candidates will take turns being the first to respond to a question, and following the question period, each candidate will make a 2-minute closing statement. Members of the League of Women Voters are serving as timers for the debates, and they will keep the candidates and me informed of the time expended. If a serious imbalance in time used occurs during the course of the debate, I'll call it to their attention and we'll see that it's corrected. As has been said, this first debate will last approximately 45 minutes and will be between the candidates for the State Senate in District 36. So it's now my pleasure to introduce the candidates for the State Senate in the 36th District. To my immediate left is Scott France, and to his left is Alex Bergstein. So let's get to the debate. Okay, we're clapping in the beginning and we're clapping in the end. All right, Scott, you're the first to respond to this question. Can you please name an area of state government that is most in need of reform, and then describe what legislation you might propose to facilitate such reform?
Sure. Thank you, Kay, and good evening, everybody. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on. Thank you, Kay, for being the moderator, and importantly, thank all of you for being engaged in the process and coming tonight. I want to thank my wife and my kids for being incredibly supportive now for almost a decade, and I would urge everybody tonight to say a prayer for the people on the panhandle of Florida and other places in Florida. It's a real disastrous storm. It's Category 5 as it was coming across the coastline. It's now Category 4. It's been pretty catastrophic so far. So pick an area where there needs to be improvement. Well, I have a laundry list about 18 miles long. However, I will narrow that down to the one all-important area, which is our fiscal foundation. We are in such bad shape right now after 48 years of one-party rule. It needs to come to an end, and there absolutely has to be some order put back into the way that we manage our fiscal affairs. We just did that within the last 12 months. We passed 2 bipartisan budgets. First time that's happened in a long, long time, probably most likely 40-plus years. Within that bipartisan budget are incredibly, fundamentally powerful tools that were never implemented before in the state of Connecticut. Number one, a a spending cap, which went into the Constitution in '92, thanks to all of you voting in favor of it, and 88 to 92%, I think it was. And that is in the Constitution now, but it was never enforced. Now it's being enforced as of January 1 of this year. Secondly, there's a bonding cap. The executive branch, the governor, was going crazy with your credit card. He was up to nearly $3 billion of your money that has to go to the debt service of those general obligation bonds. $3 billion nearly a year is unbelievable. It's unheard of. We went from $18 billion to well over $25 billion in bonded indebtedness under this person's tenure. He has a lock on the bond committee, the bond commission. There are 7 or 8 Democrats, depending on the day, and 3 Republicans. He owns that shop. So he's gone bananas with the bonding and the debt. Our debt service will go through the roof. A general rule of thumb is if your debt service is 10% of your budget, you're really pushing it. If it's 11 to 12%, big red flag. If you're 14.5 to 15, maybe even 16% based on what happened today in the marketplace, then you're insolvent because you just simply can't afford it. And number 3, there's a volatility cap, which is I'm the co-chair of the Finance Committee and worked very closely with my dear friend John Fonfara, who's the other co-chair senator, Democrat. He and I are great friends, and we work together on this to put something in the budget that makes a whole lot of sense. And that is if you have a banner year like we did last year because of federal repatriation of overseas earnings, primarily for private equity and hedge funds, we had an incredible year, and anything over $3.2 billion went into the budget reserve fund. What would I do? I'd keep that momentum up. It is so critical because nothing else matters if we can't keep our fiscal foundation in one piece. We are this close. We're number 50 in terms of cash solvency right now. We're number 49 in terms of debt management, 49 in terms of debt per capita. It's $54,000 per taxpayer. We don't have that many taxpayers anymore. We're eviscerating the tax base. We get into all kinds of things, but that is exactly what I would do.
Ms. Bergstein?
Thank you. First, I want to thank the League and Scott.
Is your microphone?
Oh, sorry. I want to thank the League and Scott and everyone for being here tonight. I'm Alex Bergstein. My husband and daughter are here. We've raised our kids in Greenwich. We feel very invested in the future of this state. I'm an attorney and an academic, and I spent my career advocating for women, children, and the environment. I put my PhD dissertation on hold to run for office because I think politics, as usual, is just not working, and we need a fresh approach. There are solutions to the state's biggest problems, and I agree with Scott that our fiscal stability is paramount. That is the first step. The bond locks, had I been in Hartford, I would have supported them too, and I'm glad Scott and 32 other senators supported them and voted for them. That is the first step to creating fiscal stability, but we also need to go farther. And the 3 top things that I've identified that we need to do is bring our liabilities down from the pension crisis, invest in our infrastructure in a novel, innovative way so that we can really make transformative change, and also reform our tax system. And when we get all of these levers of the economic engine really working, everything will start to improve. And fiscal stability is just the beginning.
Anything else to add on that question?
From either of us?
From either of you?
Sure, absolutely.
Remembering that we're aiming for equal time by the end.
3 to 1, wow. Briefly, it's super important we get our balance sheet under control. It is a disaster. It's over $100 billion of funded and unfunded liabilities, and we're looking at $12 billion of largely unsaleable assets. In the private sector, we call that insolvency or bankruptcy. I don't know what we're going to do because we're looking at $4.6 billion of deficits over the next 2 years in the biennium. I know exactly what I'll be doing if I make it back as co-chair of the Finance Committee. We're going to be going in with a scalpel and making sure that we cut in areas where there's waste, and there's a ton of waste. Don't let anybody tell you that they're down to the bone already. They're not. There are so many different ways we can save money to eliminate those budget deficits and to get the economy growing again. Corporate Connecticut is scared to death of what the balance sheet in our state looks like, and the pension liabilities are outrageous. And we can get into that later, but essentially, my opponent has a plan that Ned Lamont said has a 0.0% chance of surviving more than 2 minutes in the Capitol. Thank you.
Ms. Bergstein, do you have, please, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Bergstein, do you have anything to add to the question?
I'm not sure what that meant, that Ned Lamont has 0.0 chance of surviving in the Capitol. But I think this is actually an incredible opportunity because the state Senate is divided 18-18, and this district has never sent a Democrat to Hartford. I understand why. I always voted for Scott, too. But not having a seat at the majority table means that we don't have a voice driving the agenda in Hartford, should the Democrats retain the majority. So this is an incredible opportunity to have incredible impact, like be the driver of the agenda. And if you send a fiscally conservative Democrat to Hartford, we can really turn things around.
Okay, you're first now to answer the second question. Would you support tolls on Connecticut highways? Excuse me. If you support this, would you support putting those funds in a lockbox? If not, why not? Ms. Bergstein, you're first.
Yes, I would support installing electronic tolls, which bear no resemblance to the tolls that we had 20 years ago. Those were awful, and they bring back traumatic memories for many people. But the technology has changed dramatically, and we are the only state in the region that has not installed tolls. Up to 40% of the traffic on our highway is from out of state, so they use our roads for free. We pay for the damage they do with our tax dollars. And anytime we drive outside of our state, we're paying for their roads. So there's a reason why all the states around us have recovered from the recession and we have not. And we need to install electronic tolls and absolutely put all the funds into a lockbox. So that's going to be a referendum question on the ballot in November. Should we have a lockbox? I encourage everybody to vote yes so that we can avoid the problems of the past when the Special Transportation Fund was raided, but we can correct that problem.
Mr. France?
I'm not sure how you can be a fiscal conservative and essentially raise your taxes by a whole lot by putting in tolls. You've got a situation here in Connecticut where you have already paid for the construction and maintenance of the roadways, the bridges, railways, et cetera. You pay a ton in personal income tax. And if it's not being rated by the executive branch, it does go into the Special Transportation Fund. You pay a ton in gasoline tax. You pay 51 cents every gallon every time you go to the gas station and fill up. You pay a gross receipts tax. You pay a registration fee every time you go to renew your registration. All that money should be going into the Special Transportation Fund and should be going solely to transportation. Unfortunately, it does not, and that's the whole idea why we've been proposing as Republicans a genuine lockbox for as long as I've been there, which is now coming up on 10 years. And because the majority party never wanted to have it their way, never wanted to have a genuine lockbox, we don't have one, unfortunately. And unfortunately, I sit on the GAE committee as vice chair, and we went through the exercise of defining the language that will be on the ballot. And what the majority party did was once again weaken it, so it's possible for the executive branch to divert money before it goes into the Special Transportation Fund. It means nothing. I'll vote for it because it's a minor step in the right direction, but it means nothing. But tolls are another tax. Think of all the teachers who drive from literally an hour and 5 minutes away. They're going to be paying somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 more per year. You're not going to get a deduction for it necessarily. Think about the carpenter coming in from New Britain. I know people do this daily to his or her job in Stamford. It's going to be $4,500, $5,000 extra every year. It's a tax. Thank you.
Anything to add?
Yes, I do. I have talked to teachers and carpenters and firefighters who live in Greenwich and elsewhere in the district, and they all say to me, why don't we have tolls yet? Because they understand the big picture. They understand the opportunity cost of not having tolls is that our highways and rails are not getting better. They at best stay the same and they get worse. I have talked to thousands of people, and not a single person has said that we've seen any appreciable improvement in our roads or rails in the past 10 years. So we can keep doing the same old thing and expect different results. However, that's not going to solve our problem. If we tap into the revenue stream from tolls, which would be approximately $1 billion a year, mostly not from us, because again, 35 to 40% of the traffic is from out of state. We can charge more for trucks, more for out of state cars. So maybe 50 to 60% of that revenue stream is coming not from our tax dollars, and then we can divert it into a lockbox and then have an infrastructure bank which uses private sector capital, private sector talent to do transformative change. For instance, for $5.5 billion, we could have high-speed trains between Stanford and New York, 30 minutes. Do you know what that would do to our economy? Companies would come flocking to Connecticut if they knew they could get here in 30 minutes. Residents would come to Connecticut. We need an inflow of companies, an inflow of new residents. They're not going to come here when the trains are getting slower and older.
Next question. Ready for the next question?
Do we get to rebut that?
You may.
Yes, thank you. So that's more pie in the sky thinking. That estimate of $5 billion is way low. I've heard as much as 6 times as much for the actual construction of it. That $5 billion is really what we need just to shore up what we have right now in terms of those train assets, and to be able to really straighten it out to have genuine high-speed train service like in Europe. Actually, we won't come close to it, but we could improve things. You have to go through eminent domain. That could take another 8 to 10 to 12 years to get through. Also, the other thing, we know that it's, there were 70 to 75% of the people who pay tolls are Connecticut state residents. The trucking industry already pays tolls. We'd end up in court if we proposed that. There'd be 80 gantries according to the latest plan, and there's no guarantee that we'd make over 300 to 350 million unless we jacked up our rates so high that no one would ever want to come here to Connecticut, and that's exactly what we don't want.
May I have one last word? Thank you. So Massachusetts just installed tolls. Massachusetts is booming. Companies like GE are moving to Massachusetts. So tolls do not inhibit businesses. Tolls actually send a signal that we are harnessing technology and innovation and keeping up with our peers and doing what we need to do to really transform our infrastructure into state-of-the-art infrastructure. And the $5.5 billion came from the Regional Plan Association, which is a think tank. This is all they do, and it's also been reinforced by other business entities. So this is not a pie-in-the-sky idea. This is absolutely feasible. It's an opportunity that we're missing, and it's costing us a tremendous amount of lost business.
Next question, Mr. France, you're the first to respond. Please explain your position on gun safety. How will you plan to protect all of us into the future?
In 2013, I was an instrumental and very devoted member of the gun safety and the gun violence bill and children's safety on the task force. We put nearly 3 months of work into that. My charge was to pass a bill with the strongest gun laws in the entire country and make it bipartisan as much as possible. And I succeeded in that because after many, many months, weeks of deliberation, we put together a bill that has by far and away the strongest. There may be some other states that have slightly stronger bills now since it's been 5 years together. And I also put it into a package where we could get a bunch of other legislators, a bunch of other senators in my case, to jump on board. And I was very successful in getting 7 other Republicans to jump on board this bill. The bill has worked magnificently. We have not seen any kind of incident like that in Connecticut since then. And hopefully, knock on wood and say your prayers, that never does happen again anywhere in the world for that matter. But I put my heart and soul into that, and I believe in this bill. I was also the instrumental person who saved the ban the bump stocks bill this last May on the floor of the Senate. It's rare that you go against one of your own colleagues. A Republican is introducing an amendment to kill the bump stocks from a different part of the state where they actually think this was something that might actually be useful. But I stood up and I killed that amendment. The bill sailed through. So now bump stocks are banned. And we're now looking at ghost guns. I tried to get ghost guns onto the agenda, and Democratic leadership refused to bring it up. I think they should be banned. I know my partner wants to regulate them, but I'd love to see them banned.
Ms. Bergstein?
I know Scott believes that he's an advocate for gun safety. And maybe within his party he is. But I'm the only candidate in this race that has an A rating from Connecticut Against Gun Violence and has the distinction of the Moms Demand Action Gun Sense candidate, and I thank you both for that. I'd like to set the record straight on this because this is not a matter of interpretation. When a bill comes to a vote on the floor of the Senate and amendments are submitted at that time, which is after leadership, party leadership, has already confirmed there are enough votes to pass that bill, amendments that are submitted at that time are called call amendments or strike all. Another term is killer amendments, because the intention of those bills at that time is to delay, weaken, derail, or kill the bill. There is no room for interpretation here. And if you're not convinced, look at the letters of the amendments, increasing magazine capacity, exempting certain guns, exempting certain ammunition from permitting requirements. And if you're still not convinced, look at who voted for those bills. Every single one of those amendments was voted on by the three most extreme members of the gun rights faction in the Senate: Markley, Witkos, and Kissel. They did not vote for the gun safety bill in the end. They did not vote. They did vote for these three amendments. And I just want to say one last point on this, which is that Senator France made a statement recently to the press when asked why he supports NRA candidates who have A and A+ ratings like Stefanowski and Markley. And he said, I don't care what their gun policy is, because this legislation that we passed in 2013 is never going to be repealed. You don't have to worry about it. We do have to worry about it, because in order to get an A rating from the NRA, you have to submit a questionnaire. And I have a copy of that questionnaire right here. It is 25 questions long. Each one is very specific to Connecticut legislation. And I'll just read you question number 6. In 2013, legislation, Senate Bill 1160, which is the Sandy Hook gun safety bill, was enacted in Connecticut, banning the sale and possession of certain semi-automatic firearms and magazines holding more than 10 rounds of ammunition, et cetera, et cetera. Will you support repealing this law? You don't get an A rating from the NRA unless you answer yes, you will support repealing the Sandy Hook gun legislation. And there are many other questions in here that are specific to every single advancement that we've made in gun safety in Connecticut. This is a real and present danger. The NRA is alive and emboldened in Connecticut, as we see on the top of the ticket of the Republican Party, and also by well-intentioned individuals who support them without standing up to this agenda.
Anything to add?
Thank you. I will add that really is a stretch. And I want to tell you, I'm so...
I just call it both of your attention to the time that you've each used, just to be sure you're...
I'm so proud to announce that I did fail something in my life. It wasn't in school. It was the NRA rating system that they have. I got the big F, and for the first time, I was really proud of that F. The A rating is a hollow one. My opponent was not involved in dealing with the families after the incident up in Sandy Hook. Didn't bother calling her state senator or representatives in the House. You know, that was my life for about 2 months. I was trying to figure out how to prevent something like this from ever happening again, going up and literally adopting a family to try to get them through their grief and to get them land from the Department of Agriculture so that their daughter's memory could be put into a memorial, and it's now an animal sanctuary because Catherine Hubbard was a lover of animals. One of the toughest things I've ever done, and that was reflected in the amount of emotion that I put into the bill, the firearms bill, gun violence prevention bill. There is no such thing as a killer amendment on the floor of the state Senate. I know it's a little confusing, but they do have strike-alls. But you know, why would I be introducing strike-all amendments when I've worked so long and hard, put my heart and soul into a bill like this, and gotten bipartisan support? It's guaranteed. I got 7 Republicans to vote for it. Why would I introduce a strike-all amendment? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So. We've got a bill that's very strong. There's no way it's going to go away. And I support those other people because they have great ideas on the fiscal front. Everything else kind of takes a backseat to it. We don't have the money to pay for state police and security guards at shopping malls. How are we going to protect the public? Thank you.
All right. We're going to have to interrupt at this moment because the fire marshal is here and...
You're throwing the debaters out?
Sorry, but you two have this guaranteed seat.
We just have to clear the back of the room, all the standees. If you don't want to leave, we'll just stop. That'll be it. We'll just stop.
Right there. It's free. Come on up. Robin, come on up.
Can they sit on the floor?
Build a bigger meeting now.
Okay.
Bigger meeting.
All right. Well, they can't hear anything. Yeah. Really sorry. This is, a good news, bad news situation. Sorry we have to do this, but good that so many people are interested in the elections. So we will continue as soon as.
Sir, will you let us sit on the floor?
No, you can't sit on the floor.
No, seats only. Seats only. The standees have to leave.
Even these on the side.
Yep.
Sorry, those of you, all standees have to depart. All standee. He's just telling me that all standees have to depart. It's for everyone's safety, as I'm sure you understand, no matter how disappointed you may be.
It's kind of crazy because they allow this all the time.
I know.
Town.
So I say it's
And at the last debate, they allowed everyone to stand. Oh, well. They're enforcing the laws. That's good.
okay.
Whoever doesn't.
I know. Yeah. Those of you who are.
For, of course, the people on a camera.
Oh, yes, no, the people. Those of you who are still standing in the back, we cannot proceed until you depart. I'm sorry. Those of you standing there in the back, I'm sorry, but we cannot continue. Are you sitting in a chair? Sitting on a table.
No, we just won't have the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, come on. We want to continue with this, so please, I'm sorry, but this is the way it has to be. Again, we're appreciative of. We appreciate the interest, but
You get that?
this is the way it has to be.
Oh, I'm not sure what's going to go on.
Now, those chairs, however, will be used by other candidates in the second debate, so, yeah. Okay, may we proceed?
Standing over here, and it'll be unfair to the people.
Okay, those of you standing over here, we have to ask you to depart. No, the fire marshal is telling me. Like I say, you will have the opportunity to, Channel 79 will be replaying this debate a number of times, and you will have the opportunity to see it then. Again, it's wonderful to have so many people interested, but we have to follow the rules.
Okay,
Thank
so we
you.
can continue, and then if stragglers come back in, we'll just stop it.
Well, can we have two people at the doors and just why
Yeah,
don't
we
you-
might even get some police officers here because I have a feeling people are just going to come back
Okay.
in.
Whatever you have to do. All right, I'm not sure how much time we lost there, but have we finished with the gun question?
Sure.
Either of you have anything else to add? All right. Then I believe it's Ms. Bergstein's turn to be first to answer the question. And the question is, and before I say it, like I say, if people come back in, they are going to have police officers here, so if you had to go out, you got to stay out. Sorry. All right, the question. What is your position on plastic pollution? Do you think strong legislation is needed to reduce plastic pollution? If not, how do you plan on effectively addressing the issue?
I'm so glad somebody asked that question because I've devoted my career to advocating for the environment and children's health because everything we put into the environment, including plastic, pesticides, chemicals, and other pollutants, ends up at some point in our children's bodies, in the water, the food, the products that we consume. And this is absolutely something that I am passionate about. That's actually how I spent time when I went to Hartford over the years to advocate for children's environmental health. I brought forth several bills. I testified for other bills to try to prevent exposure, unnecessary exposure to harmful toxins, including plasticizers. I fully supported the plastic ban bag here in Greenwich, and I am so delighted that it has now sparked a a mini plastic bag revolution. Stanford Board of Representatives just passed a plastic ban. I know New Canaan is working on one, and there are other cities and towns around Connecticut that are doing the same, and it's wonderful. Citizen advocacy is so powerful. We as consumers and citizens really do have the power to make change if we're informed, if we're engaged, and if we're organized. So if I go to Hartford, I would be a strong voice for environmental protection, not just protecting our natural resources and promoting clean energy, but also protecting our most precious resource, which is our children, their health, and their future.
Mr. France?
I cannot emphasize enough that how much I love the environment, first of all, and secondly, how important it is. I love the environment, I really do. And if you want to talk about how they do their grading system, be more than happy to talk to you offline about that. Because what they'll do, because someone actually has an interest in increasing commerce in the state of Connecticut, that they're giving some new company that's being started right here in Stamford or New Haven that maybe did something a little bit wrong, to not fine them, to put them out of business the very, very first time, as long as they didn't hurt anybody, didn't hurt the environment or anything like that. That is super, super important for our economic situation, because we have the worst business reputation in the entire country right now, and we have to, as a result of something like that, then your grade starts to fall because they don't really see that as valuable. But as someone who really does appreciate the environment, I spend a lot of time outdoors, belong to a lot of different groups such as Audubon, all the other ones across the country as well. I think managing the whole plastic situation is a great thing, and I applaud my opponent for that. She does a wonderful job there, and I'm with her 110%. I don't think we need to take the approach that Governor Jerry Brown takes when he, pointed at the kid who had the plastic straw and said, if you take one more sip, you're going to jail. Thank you.
Okay. Anything to add?
Yeah, I'm so glad Scott raised the bill that he was just referring to, which was that your original bill?
Is this 269?
Yeah.
269 was my bill.
Okay.
That's correct.
Which says that a company that pollutes, that violates our environmental laws for the first time will get a free pass, as long as they agree to clean it up, that they will not be subject to any penalty. So that, in essence, is a free pass to pollute bill. And there is absolutely no reason that we need to invite companies to pollute in our state. That is not a responsible way to attract business or to promote commerce. We don't want polluters in Connecticut, and we don't have to do that. There are so many opportunities to promote positive commerce in our state. Now, that bill went all the way to the House and Senate for a vote. So I think it's a very bad idea. I would never be behind something like that. But it did get a lot of traction, and that just shows you how cognizant we have to be about balancing our commercial and consumer interests and protecting our environment. We were once a leading state in environmental protection, and that is now grinding to a halt and actually reversing with ideas like that.
Anything else?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. One thing we learned when we first arrived 10 years ago up in Hartford is you got to read the bill. Bills are very difficult to read because it's legal language and they're run-on sentences, and it's very difficult to understand. But the fundamental thing that has to be done, you have to understand what the bill's intent is and what the actual language is. The words are important. In that bill, Senate Bill 269, it is clear that if there was no damage done to the environment, but they were emitting too much, benzene or something like that, and they're a young company, or it's the first time they ever had an offense, that they had an ability to fix the problem and not be fined. This is where experience comes in handy, ladies and gentlemen. I've been at this economic development exercise for 25 years now, going back to when I was chairman of the Connecticut Development Authority as a volunteer like I am today in everything I do, and then Bradley International Airport, and then in the state Senate, doing things for the good of the economy, which I know has helped. But the biggest complaint I get is your environmental regulations and enforcement personnel are out of control. I adopted several different business cases, and I cannot disagree with them. These people were sadistic, literally sadistic, in dealing with these different cases. All of those companies, every single of the ones that I adopted, are now gone because they're out of business.
Anything else on that question?
Yes. I'm glad Scott mentioned that you need some legal framework to be able to understand these bills. I am a lawyer. I'm also a PhD candidate, so I'm very familiar with looking closely at language and not taking anything at face value, which is why I spoke to other legislators, your peers in the Senate, to ask them about this bill, because on the face of it, it seemed so preposterous. And everyone I spoke to agreed and said it was a bad bill. I'll just close by saying I am also very proud to have the endorsement of the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters. It's not often that they endorse a challenger, and in this case, they thought that I would be the trusted person in Hartford to carry forth a strong environmental agenda without sacrificing anything for the businesses.
Next question, Mr. France, your turn to be first. Excuse me. Would you explain your position on reproductive rights? And if federal funding for Planned Parenthood is withdrawn, would you support state funds to replace them?
So Connecticut has the strongest, I believe, the strongest women's choice bills on the books. The statutes are very clear. I've read them several times, and they will not be touched, no matter what happens anywhere in this country. In Connecticut, they're not going to be touched. It is in there forever, and you have a lot of legislators who will go to bat to make sure that they are not changed, including me. So I'm in favor of maintaining those laws that maintain a woman's right to choose within the parameters that they outlined in the statutory language. And the second part of the question was, I think, Planned Parenthood funding.
Yes, if it were withdrawn at the federal level,
there's
with the state.
Wonderful, wonderful things that Planned Parenthood does. And if the feds were to withdraw all of their funding, I think it would be completely legitimate if we had the money to give to Planned Parenthood. But again, ladies and gentlemen, it's so critical that everybody understands we are on the precipice right now of essentially insolvency. If we don't do the right things here, maintain the fiscal disciplines that we have in the bipartisan budget going forward, we're not going to have any money to fund any of these social programs, any of the safety net programs, education, environmental funding. It's so critical. That's why you absolutely have to think very hard about who you vote for, someone with experience, someone who's in a position to actually do something about this budgetary situation, as well as the pensions. We can get into that, later on. But
okay, back to Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
We're done.
Ms. Bergstein?
Yes, thank you. I'm also proud to be the endorsed candidate of Planned Parenthood and NARAL because I am their choice for who will carry forth and protect a woman's right to choose in Connecticut. And it doesn't really matter that we have a statute that protects women's choice. Statutes can be repealed. And as we're seeing now at the national level, Supreme Court precedent may be repealed. So we cannot take any of these rights for granted. That would be foolish. We really need to have strong voices that stand up and that say, we're not going to allow this to happen. Now, what I would propose is a constitutional amendment to the state constitution of Connecticut. That is a further protection. We could have an equal rights amendment that protected women's reproductive choice, that also guaranteed equal pay, which we still do not have in Connecticut. On the issue of funding Planned Parenthood, I've been a supporter and funder of Planned Parenthood for many years because the numbers prove that investing in primary care and prevention and reproductive services for women who may not have other options, other healthcare options, saves money because otherwise women would have no choice. They may have unwanted pregnancies. Every dollar we invest in Planned Parenthood saves at least $7 in social costs later on. So not to mention the impact that it has on women's lives. If women can't control their own family planning, they can't fully participate in the workforce. They are driven into poverty. Poverty is something that a fiscal conservative should want to avoid because poverty is the biggest burden on social services. And so I think it's smart business policy, it's smart economic policy, and it's just the right thing to do to invest up front in Planned Parenthood and other primary health services and reproductive choice.
And I don't disagree at all. I don't think a constitutional amendment is necessary, but if that's the way the people of Connecticut would like to see it, I'll be the first one voting for it. Thank you.
Okay, next question, and Ms. Bergstein, you're the first to respond. We haven't talked about traffic.
Traffic, yeah.
I-95, et cetera.
Oh.
So several questions about what, if any, solutions are there to our traffic issues in the state.
There are lots of solutions that we are just not using. And it's remarkable because states all around us are implementing changes all the time. For instance, my mother lives in Washington, D.C. and Virginia, and she just told me they just changed a lane, a center lane on the highway into not just a high-speed occupancy vehicle lane, but also a premium pass lane. So you can pay extra and travel in this express lane, get to where you're going faster. It has reduced traffic significantly. Another thing that other states are implementing is they're removing the concrete barrier that we have in the middle of 95. That can be removed, and you can have a center lane that alternates direction based on the way traffic is flowing. So northbound or southbound, depending on which way an extra lane is needed. These are simple changes that we could use right away, we could implement right away to mitigate traffic flow. But really, the best way to mitigate traffic flow is to improve our rails and our public transportation. And that's why we need to install electronic tolls. Also, by installing electronic tolls, we can use congestion pricing, which creates, surge pricing during peak travel times, but we can also have discounts for commuters, and it just encourages trucks and other non-essential cars to spread out the traffic over the period of a day. So, and if we improve our trains, which again we can do for $5.5 billion, we could have 30-minute trains back and forth Stanford to New York. Imagine that. Imagine how many thousands of cars would come off the road if you could be guaranteed to get to New York in 30 minutes.
Mr. Frank?
So we have a great plan that will involve saving a lot of money and a lot of hassle and would obviate the need of tolls in the first place. And what we're doing is we're taking the Special Transportation Fund borrowings, the federal contributions to our highway plan and rails plan, and then we're eliminating a whole lot of borrowing. This is within the affordable capacity of general obligation bonds, eliminating a lot of waste there and putting that into a program that will substantially pay for all of the repairs and improvements that we need to do over the next 30 years. This would be 58 to 60 some odd $1 billion over that period of time. And at the end of the day, it's all about fluid dynamics. You need to have higher throughput of cars, I'm just talking about congestion on the highways, in order to improve that situation. If you're talking about eliminating cars on the highway, there are lots of ways to do that. You can improve your rail service. You can improve the frequency of the service, and you can improve the speed to a certain degree when it's affordable. There are some new technologies coming along which are very exciting. Think Popular Science. If you ever read that magazine, there are some areas that are really exciting. I'm not going to go into them right now. It'll take too long. Where you're actually levitated, or you're actually flying over the train tracks, just over the electrical system above. And so if you're looking at fluid dynamics, you smooth things out. These are low-hanging pieces of fruit. You smooth things out. You figure out the entrances. You figure out the exits. Right here at exit 3, anybody try to get off here in the morning between 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning, and 9 o'clock? It doesn't happen. You're backed up on the highway. One of these days, someone's going to get hurt out there. So what you do is you think of out-of-the-box solutions. You make it a right-hand turn for about 90 minutes in the morning. And so if you're going to, say, Arch Street, you have to go around the block to get there. Big deal, but you're not the sitting duck on the highway anymore. So it's out-of-the-box thinking like that, not wasting money on projects we don't need, like the New Britain Busway at $700 million, ripping up light rail track to build a new busway that no one uses and requires a $25 to $30 million a year subsidy. We've got to get smarter about those things. That's how we can start to make at least incremental changes, improvements to our traffic situation on 95 and 91. Thank you.
Any other comment on that question?
Well, I just have a question. I thought I heard you say $58 to $60 billion. Where is that coming from?
I just explained it. So we have from.
But that's all new bonded debt.
No. What we're doing, there's a bond cap now, which is $1.9 billion.
Right.
Okay. I think you read that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So how do you get to fiscal?
Within that $1.9 billion, you eliminate the wasteful projects that this money goes to. $250 million to the XL Center. All the money that has gone into the Walk Bridge so far, a $1.1 billion bridge that could have been built for about $300 million if they were smart about it, and made it a fixed bridge and bought out the two businesses that work above it. The high-speed rail to Springfield, and the only people who seem to ride it are the ones who want to go up to Springfield to the new casino and drop their money up there, cost a fortune, and no one's riding it. And that's going to be, we don't know yet, but I'm going to guess $30 to $35 million in subsidy every year. We simply can't afford to do that, and we should never have done those projects. That's where the money's going to come from, to put it into the right areas to improve our transportation. We have to get a lot smarter.
Anything else on that question?
Yeah, I would just say the math doesn't seem to work. That didn't add up to $55 or $60 billion. And what we really need is a new source of revenue, and we need to harness private sector capital. We need public-private partnerships to figure out how to transform our infrastructure. That is what every state and every modern country is doing around the world. We are the outlier. We're lagging behind because we're not taking advantage of unlocking billions in private sector capital, which we could have if we had tolls, we had the revenue stream, we could leverage that with billions of dollars to the tune of $8 to $10 billion a year. That's how we'd add up to $55 to $60 billion.
All right, on that note, it is time to move to closing statements. We did factor in the missed time. Each candidate will have 2 minutes, and I'll give the timers time to clear their stopwatches so that you can time a 2-minute closing statement. Are you ready, timers? Okay. Mr. France, you're first.
Thank you, Kay. I appreciate that. Thank all of you. Thank you for your trust in me for nearly 10 years right now. It's a real privilege to serve you in the State Senate. It's a huge, huge job, and it's like having 4 part-time, maybe 5 part-time jobs on top of a daily job in the private equity business. But I love the challenge of it. I love being able to help people one-on-one. I don't think you'll find many people more responsive to constituents than this delegation and certainly myself. I try to return everybody's email, phone call. I'll visit them in person. I'm like their on-call doctor if that's what they need. I cannot emphasize enough to you the progress that we've made as a result of the split in the Senate, 18 to 18. We now have the ability to save the state of Connecticut. If you send another majority party person up there, I'm telling you, this is the God's honest truth. They are told how to vote, and they get punished pretty severely in some cases if they don't vote the way the majority party leadership folks want them to vote. That you need to keep in mind, because they could take all of this progress away from us, and we could easily get ourselves into trouble. Our balance sheet is terrible, as I was talking about before. We need to improve that really fast. The corporate world is scared to death of it. People who look at the state of Connecticut don't move here because of that. My opponent claims to be a fiscal conservative, but there's really no track record there, and I'm not sure she has much experience in the way of financial affairs. We talked briefly about the pension system. That is a pie-in-the-sky idea that's just not going to fly at all. It would get laughed out of the union negotiating room in a heartbeat. And it's important also to understand how state government works, with respect to the terminology on the floor of the state Senate, or the House for that matter. And, negotiating with unions, that's an executive branch function. It has nothing to do with the legislator. With this candidacy, you have someone with proven experience, an unbelievable track record when it comes to being a fiscal conservative and working their tail off, and also being in a very powerful position to lead us into the next decade or so with fiscal responsibility in place in concrete. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Ms. Bergstein. Ms. Bergstein, your 2-minute closing statement.
As I said at the beginning of this debate, I am deeply invested in the future of Connecticut. We face serious challenges, but I think we're poised for a spectacular recovery, because excellent solutions are within our grasp. If we seize these opportunities, we can become the modern, thriving state we should be. With fiscal stability and good governance, world-class transportation, and low taxes. If we seize these opportunities, we'll be a premier destination for business that brings 21st century jobs and new residents who buy houses, keeping property values high and taxes low. If we embrace innovation and grow a resilient economy, we'll be the state where people choose to live, because we already have beautiful towns, excellent schools, and an ideal location. And if we vigilantly protect the values that make our state desirable, a clean environment, women's rights, marriage equality, and public safety, will not only enhance our own quality of life, will attract high-quality companies. We must never take these rights for granted or think that they can't be eroded. So I ask each of you to have an open mind, to put party aside, and be willing to work together for the future of our state. When we speak to each other as neighbors and equals, we find so much common ground. And when we work together for the greater good, we can build a brilliant future. I am bullish on Connecticut, and I hope you are too. Thank you.
All right.
Nice job, Alex.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, audience, for your cooperation. And we have to do a quick switch to get our candidates for the House up here, and we're running late, as you know. So if you're not staying for this second part, we would appreciate it if you would get out quickly, because some of those who are standing outside may want to come on. Right? Oh, they're right here. Great job. First is Meskers, then Bacino. Because he's really smart. Bacino. No, first here. 1, 2. Just the same way we did the others. Meskers, Bacino, and then Costin and Camilla.
I passed it. You got mine?
Yeah, but leave a space between the two districts. I think it makes it a little easier.
I don't know where I'm sitting.
Shh. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we do have another debate coming up among 4 candidates for the...
Where am I sitting?
And we're running late because of our crowd, so if you could exit quickly if you're not going to stay. Shh, please.
Yeah, fine.
Okay, that's me. We just want a space between the two districts.
And thank you all for for being a very cooperative audience.
You're here, Mike. You guys need water?
What? Not our fault.
My recording might be because I can't see.
We need a different chair.
We'll be okay. Just keep the...
Yeah, I thought you all were... You settle it.
I need a phone book.
We want to begin the second debate as soon as we can. Shh. So again, please, if you're not staying, we would appreciate it if you'd step out into the hall. And there's some seats available now over here for any of those who want to come in.
Recovery?
No, still in depression. State of depression.
That last game, I guess, was pretty exciting, huh? You had to have a call at the end.
I turned it off. And I should have stayed on tonight. I didn't want to see them celebrating.
My son-in-law and grandson, who are big Yankee fans, at the 16-1 game, they turned it off at the third inning. You couldn't watch it.
They were smart. They were smart. That will go up.
Okay. Thank you.
You gotta wait until next week.
These two are doing your time.
They should go up.
Because I don't know how to do it.
It's all right.
All right. Candidates are ready. Timers are ready. The audience is ready. Here we go. It's now my pleasure to introduce the candidates for state representative in both District 150 and District 151. The way we have divided this, these two, District 150, the other two, District 151. The order in which they're seated was due to a drawing. First is Steve Meskers. To his left is Mike Bocchino. They are the candidates for the 150th District. And the candidates for state rep in the 151st District are Laura Costin and Fred Camillo. So let's get to the debate. And the first candidate to respond will be Mr. Meskers. Excuse me. And the first question is, how would you suggest solving the problems with the state pension program? A nice, easy one to start.
Thank you for probably the toughest question of the evening and the single most prominent problem we face in Connecticut. The answer is not an easy one. We have a huge gap in our funded liabilities in Connecticut. Our pension fund system was a pay-as-you-go system from 1931 to approximately 1975. In 1984, those pensions began to be fully funded for a short while and then were left unfunded. The gap is tremendous. The problem with the pension fund is a very hard one to resolve because about 90% of the Tier 1 retirees, who are people who entered the system before 1984, are already retired. Those benefits include both medical costs, cost of living increases that are choking the state. Those expenditures are constitutionally guaranteed, not by Connecticut, but by the U.S. Constitution. So how we go about addressing the major stumbling block in our pensions are going to require some smart thinking. Currently, the Teachers' Pension Fund, which is one of the two major pension funds, was they bonded about 10 years ago and committed to fully fund the system by 2032, I believe. Those pension payments, depending on the accrual rates, which are currently using an assumed accrual rate of 8%, which for pensions is impossible to their kind of yield to get to, are going to leave us with a potential shortfall on the order of $6 billion out about 4 or 5 years from now. So the issue on the pension funds are twofold. One, it's dealing with the current employees of the state, which have cost of living increase guaranteed with a minimum of 2%. And the second is dealing with the medical costs, which are spiraling at the rate of 7 to 10% a year on average. How we deal with those, the first, on the unfunded liabilities that we're contractually obligated under the U.S. Constitution, I don't think that we're going to be in the position to fully fund those in the time frame that we've allocated for that. And there's a couple of different studies. The best study I read was a 68-page painful report from Boston College. And that suggests we may need to extend out the payments on those funds. The second is with the existing employees, we're going to have to look at the cost of living increases. And thirdly, where we all focus on costs and the cost to us, we need to look at creative solutions in terms of medical costs and drug costs. Currently, 4 states are applying to the FDA for a waiver to import drugs from Canada. Those drugs are approximately 50% cheaper than they are in the United States. So in addition to anything else, we're going to have to look at appealing to see how we can contain the costs in our overall medical system here in Connecticut. And I think...
Mr. Bocchino?
Thank you very much. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us tonight. Thank you, Kay, for moderating. Take a moment to thank my beautiful wife, Shannon, and my 2 kids, Michael and Sean, for supporting me through this endeavor. Time is a precious thing, and we donate a lot of it to our position here. this is a very difficult situation that we're in right now. And let's be quite clear and quite frank about why we're in the place that we're in. 40 years of Democratic rule in the State House and in the Senate has put us into the position that we're in today. We've had Republican governors and Democratic governors over the years. But let's not kid ourselves. The buck stops with the legislature and the buck stops with the Senate. And during that time, those individuals who had represented, prior to myself being up there, in the majority rule, have done everything that they can to abide by the unions pushing them and lobbying them into negotiations that the state of Connecticut could not afford. And now we are in a position now where our teachers, our state employees, are the ones who we're looking to make particular changes. Now, here's the thing with this. We've made obligations, contractual obligations to these individuals, and we need to abide by those obligations. And it's a very, very tricky thing to be able to do that, but also then to stop the bleeding and go to a different form, whatever product it may be. My personal belief is that we should be looking at a defined contribution under a defined benefits model, basically a hybrid of the two. And we should be looking at doing that moving forward January 1, when we have a new governor elected and we have a new legislature elected. It's for all new hires, and we should be looking at whether or not new hires, you know, unfortunately may be you've been working there for 3 years, for 2 years, whatever it might be. But here's the thing. We have a Democratic majority. I don't care what the opponent that was against Mr. France was saying about a split 18-18. It is a Democratic majority because the lieutenant governor has the deciding vote on every issue that goes in front of that particular body. And if there is an 18-18 split, the lieutenant governor, I know this for fact because they did it, will vote for the majority party. And when that happens, you get something like the CBAC agreement that is thrown out. Worst, absolute worst. Every economist will tell you that that was the worst deal that the state of Connecticut ever could have made. Ever could have made. Put us in a situation where we are basically, as Senator France said, taking our kids' credit cards and we are maxing them out before they've even reached the age of 12 or 13. What we need to do is we need to recognize the situation that we're in. I've done that while I was up in Hartford. I met with the chairs of finance, the entire committee of the finance committee, as well as the appropriations committee. And I said, here's a deal. We all come back here. This is what we're going to do. And actually, to Peter Tessie's credit, after listening, they've taken this into consideration here, and we're having an economic forum in the town of Greenwich in November, which you all should attend. But what I told them was this. Whether you like Greenwich or you don't like Greenwich, we have all the experts here in the town of Greenwich. We have the risk managers, we have the hedge funds, we have the finance guys and women. We have everybody here who is a specialist, who've put their blood, sweat, and tears into these industries for many, many years. Now, come down to Greenwich. We will get a large table set up in the Hyatt, and I want all of you to come down. These are attorneys, realtors, small business owners, all who sit on finance and all who sit on appropriations. And I want you to sit around that table, and I want you to do one thing. Be quiet and listen to the professionals. We need professionals who understand what products are out there, what products work for different municipalities, what products work for the state in general. And that's how we're going to get out of this. We're not going to get out of this with one mindset of this is how we're going to do this with blinders on. We need everybody and all hands on deck. And those individuals who have the expertise and the knowledge, and majority of them are right here in the town of Greenwich. That's how we're going to get out of this. But it's
You'll have a chance to come back to it, but
it's going to take some time, but it has to be in a hybrid manner.
Okay, thank you. Now moving to the 151st District. Ms. Costin, your response to the same question about solving the problems with the state pension program.
I'm hearing...
Is your microphone on?
Can you hear me? Thank you to the League. This is a wonderful forum, and thank you to our opponents for participating. I'm hearing a lot of blame, not a lot of solutions, and the question was about solutions. So There have been a few that are proposed, and they're quite valid. One of them being monetizing our $18 billion in assets on the books and applying that to reduce our unfunded liabilities. Also, devoting 1/2 of one-shot revenue, which is windfall we didn't expect to get. We have a higher, we have almost $1 billion in our general fund right now, thanks to these kinds of one-shot revenues. And the other idea put forward by the Commission on Fiscal Stability and Economic Growth, we were all at that forum last week, was tapping the lottery and using some of that to pay down our unfunded liabilities. So there are solutions out there. They've been proposed by a commission put together by our legislature. I don't think we should just cast those solutions aside. Thank you.
Mr. Camillo?
Thank you. I, too, want to thank the League tonight for staging this, and Kay for being the moderator. To my colleagues, Scott and Mike, and our opponents, thank you. In 2017, the Democrats were 5.5 months late with the budget, so they invited us in, which was a great thing, and we worked in a bipartisan fashion, and we gave them a list of things that we wanted in order for our votes on that budget. Surprisingly, they agreed to all our economic reforms, which is a great thing for the state of Connecticut. You heard about some of them in the earlier debate. What they didn't agree to was anything to do with the unions. I'm not bashing unions. I was a member of 2 of them, and I've been endorsed by one of the biggest unions in Connecticut. But it's a problem. We gave them some low-hanging fruit, and they didn't want to budge on it. So I agree. You don't want to sit here and cast blame all night long, but you do have to state facts, and state facts with solutions. Simple things like, going forward prospectively, new hires, defined contribution, or a hybrid model, defined contribution under a defined benefit model. Not allowing pension padding. Okay, I don't blame the union workers for doing that. The system allowed it. So you work a lot of overtime the last 3 years, and then you get a big fat pension. There's one UConn professor that makes about $350,000 a year pension. He's 57 years old. We can't afford that. That's low-hanging fruit. I think, as Mike Pacino said, Representative Pacino, we should look more to the professionals on this. But at the end of the day, we really do have to sit down and address it, because it's not getting done, and even the low-hanging fruit was rejected. So I get it. It was a compromised budget, and we were very happy with it. So I think that's the next step, is to deal with the pension issue.
Anyone have any additional comment they want to make?
Yes, I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters and my wife, Monica, and my lovely son, Christian, who are here today, and my colleagues at the table. Having been in the RTM and only speaking for myself for the last 14 years in my district, I didn't have to welcome and thank all the other attendees, so I apologize. Yes, I would say that, one, I do bring 35 years of international finance to the table. I've worked with emerging economies for most of my adult life. I've worked through bankruptcies and restructurings. I've covered pension funds on the investing side. So none of the language or the dealings are foreign to me. I think when we talk about the problems, the best study I saw, and I didn't go into details, was Boston College, and their commentary was what we're screaming about is essentially the Tier 1 employees, 90% of whom are currently retired. Their benefits are constitutionally guaranteed. We have a wall of funding that needs to get done. The contracts now we're attempting to fully fund by, I believe, 2032. That is just not going to happen without canceling out all the social spending, all the transfers, all of the support for the values that we hold in the state. So I agree. I think we need to have a serious conversation with the current employees of the state, but that problem pales in comparison to the problems that we face from obligations that were contractually given and constitutionally, U.S. constitutionally guaranteed a while ago.
Anyone else, any more comment on that question? All right, then the second question, Mr. Vocino, you'll be the first to respond. Would you support tolls on Connecticut roads? And if so, do you agree that tolls should only be allowed if connected to a lockbox?
No, I don't support tolls. I don't support another tax for the people in the people. No applauding it. I don't support tolls for people in the town of Greenwich, nor in the state of Connecticut, nor in Fairfield County. Let's talk about the lockbox. We can't do. Listen, let me just say, tolls may be inevitable coming down the line. Okay? But right now where the state of Connecticut is, we cannot afford to do tolls. If we could afford to do tolls and do it properly, again, let's not forget ourselves and let's not kid ourselves. The Democrats are in the majority party in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. And they would have called tolls to the floor and they would have passed it. But what happened was they didn't have the votes. Why? Because many of the Democrats recognize that tolling right now for the state of Connecticut is not an option that we can afford to do. You will cripple businesses. You will cripple the people. The middle-income people will be the ones that are hit the most. We talk about zone pricing or whatever. It's just not going to work, because who's it going to hit? It's going to hit our teachers. It's going to hit the guys who are plumbers and pipe fitters or electricians who are going to a job and then realize, oh my God, I forgot such and such a piece. I got to go back to my yard and pick up this piece of equipment. Back and forth, back and forth. 80 gantries is what the Democrats had already, the governor had put forward. 80 gantries throughout the state. That's 95, 91, Merritt Parkway. Oh, and by the way, for those of you that are in the Merritt Parkway Conservancy, forget about it, because it's going to ruin the historical nature of the Merritt Parkway, because you're going to have these gantries up that won't fit into the historical nature of the Merritt Parkway. But anyway, let's get back to the tolls. So tolls are not going to bring us out of the issues and problems that we have. As Senator France said, we have the money and funding right now to put into our infrastructure. But we don't have the people in place that are putting the money where it should be. The Democrats' idea of a lockbox is this. Yes, all the money that goes into the transportation lockbox then goes out and goes towards transportation, but it doesn't necessarily go into it. It can be diverted and used to whatever place they need to use it at that time, like general obligation fund or the general fund in budgeting. So until we adopt a constitutional lockbox that is sound, we shouldn't be talking about tolls. Until that money is guaranteed, every revenue stream that we get for transportation goes directly into that box and it doesn't go anyplace, we shouldn't be talking about tolls. We should be talking about restructuring the way that we do business in Hartford. And that's getting rid of the majority party that's in there right now. 40 years we've been struggling with this. Enough is enough.
Ms. Costin, your response to the same question?
I take a sort of nuanced approach. I think at least the trucks should be paying tolls. They pay everybody else, and they don't pay us, and they chew up our roads and cause 90% of the damage to our roads, and we make no money to repair them. I am in favor of a transportation lockbox. I do hope that ballot measure passes. It's vitally important for our state. However, while I would hate to see any families who are already struggling have to pay a greater portion of their paycheck toward tolls, I will tell you, I know I'm from a yucky state. I'm from New Jersey. But listen, the Jersey Turnpike is 122 miles long in New Jersey. It brings in about $1.2 billion. I-95 in Connecticut is 111 miles long, and it brings in nothing. It just costs us money. So when the Regional Planning Association and the Commission on Fiscal Stability says tolls are inevitable, believe them. It's probably going to happen. That's just where I stand.
Mr. Camillo?
Well, first of all, I don't think New Jersey is that bad. Come on. I do want to correct Laura one little thing. The truckers do pay They pay about $30 million a year in fees. But I agree they do cause most of the damage.
Maybe at the way stations, not at tolls.
No, the way stations are, unfortunately, that's
always
one.
Closed, I
yeah,
know.
Unfortunately, when Jody Rell tried to take the DMV, the state troopers out of the way stations, we fought it successfully. When Dan Malloy did it, we kind of lost some support there, and they allowed it to happen. To me, it was a public safety issue, but also it was a cash cow. And when they were bringing in a lot of money, unfortunately, they're never open. 4 years ago, the scale was broke on it. It took 5.5 months to fix. And you wonder why people get upset with government. But no, I'm not for tolls, but certainly as legislators, we don't have the liberty to say no and yes and forget about it. We have to really dig deep into it. So we have been looking in, speaking with attorneys, House and Senate, seeing what we can do. And certainly one of the things is tax those, toll those truckers. But New Jersey's on my mind now. Rhode Island does that. And I was surprised that the trucking industry didn't get them into court right away, which they're in right now. So I think we probably should wait a little bit to see how that turns out. I have a feeling it's not going to turn out well for Rhode Island. We were told that we can't let Connecticut drivers go for free because that would violate the interstate commerce. So Dan Malloy's own administration, their figures are that our citizens would pay about 70% of it. They say we could give a little bit of a deduction somewhere, maybe in our income taxes or property taxes, but that's not, we've been warned by scholars all around the country, don't get too cute with that. It's a way to avoid it and avoid that interstate commerce compact. So it's not a sure thing what we can actually give back to our residents. So it's a complicated issue. I do agree with Mike Pacino that they may be inevitable, and it's up to us to make sure the best possible system's in place. Yes, the gantries, they wanted 80 gantries. When they took them down in '87, and most of us were living here then, from the terrible accident in Stratford, there were only 14. The Malloy administration's own estimate was, I believe, for if you had a 10-mile commute, was another $1,000 a year. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And a user fee is when you go to the golf course, right? You have the chance whether to go up to the Griff and play 9 or not, or a beach cart. We're all on 95. That's a fee you have to pay. And we consider and say it's a fee or a tax. I would say it's a tax, but we're not going to settle that argument tonight. But it's a lot more complicated than you think. And let's pay attention to the figures on this because, again, Massachusetts brings a bigger state than us. We heard the $1 billion figure in the last debate. Massachusetts takes in about $400 to $500 million. Rhode Island, small state, truckers, I believe 20 million. New Jersey, a lot less. New York is the big one because they have those bridges. I think they get about 1.8 billion. So I don't think it would bring in 1 billion either, but certainly stay tuned. There's a lot of things that has to be hashed out with that.
Mr. Mesker, I need to get Mr. Mesker's first, and then we'll come back to any other additional comments.
And I won't say anything about New Jersey, I promise. So there's a lot of different ways to look at tolls, and there's a lot of ways to look at the state economy. Whether you call it a user tax, a user fee, or a tax, the opposition rings on those two subjects. I think the easiest way to look at it is that we're running a multi-state charity on I-95. We're funding the rest of the traffic, and for some reason we think that's okay. And there isn't another state in the Northeast that lets you ride for free. Now, when you go to the issues of the funds and the Special Transportation Fund, about 60% of the revenue in the Special Transportation Fund is dedicated to bus and rail lines. About 40% is to highway maintenance. Our highways are rated somewhere around 42 between the bridges and highways in terms of the maintenance and soundness of our transportation system. We haven't made an investment in transportation since Eisenhower. Now, if you're trying to build a state economy with both manufacturing and high tech, if you can't get anywhere, you're headed nowhere. And that's super important. If you think about the economy, the first thing I would tell you is we've got a tax issue we've got to resolve. We've got a pension issue we've got to resolve. We've got out-of-state revenue we can capture that for some reason people don't want to, and I find it both foolish and not pragmatic at all. That money for infrastructure is the first engine of economic growth when you're trying to rebuild the state. That provides construction jobs, there's a multiplier impact, and if we don't get on the bandwagon of fixing our infrastructure, we're going to be waiting for companies to relocate and trying to cut taxes with no sources of revenue. So I would tell you that we need to stop the giveaway on I-95.
Ms. Costin, you wanted to add something?
I would just like to say that, you know, the 1.2 to 1.4 billion that New Jersey brings in is not a figure that's in dispute. That's what they report their revenue that they get from tolling. So that's not in dispute. I would also like to say that we are near dead last when it comes to our rail infrastructure. Half our roads, more than half, are in poor condition. And we have 300 structurally deficient bridges, yet no revenue to devote to any of them. So I think that we desperately need revenue for our transportation infrastructure. While tolls from I-95 may not be able to be devoted specifically to those other projects, we do need a revenue stream that is viable to fund our transportation infrastructure.
Mr. Camillo, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Yes, and I wasn't disputing New Jersey's figures. And I think we all agree that it's critical that we fix our infrastructure for transportation. It's critical to recruiting and retaining businesses here. But we have to stop. We have to spend smartly, too. We have wasted a lot of money up there. Many of us were against the New Britain Busway, where we spent almost $700 million for 9 miles of road that's not even heavily used. And they tore up light rail to do that. So we have to be a little smarter. And you know, I've met with Commissioner Rediker. He's a real decent man, and he agrees with a lot of our ideas. And I went with Representative Jonathan Steinberg, a Democrat of Westport, bipartisan effort, and to bring some out-of-the-box private partnership ideas there. And he agrees. He gets very excited and then returns the call. So I don't think it's a priority for this administration. The good news is there will be a new governor, whoever that is, and we get another crack at it.
Mr. Bacino, did you?
Thanks, yes. What's foolish is the way we spend our money, is the way that we don't put it into the transportation. Connecticut spends 497,659 miles per road. That's the 44th highest rate in the country. But Connecticut also, out of that, spends 99,417 per mile in administrative costs. It doesn't make any sense. So these are laudable goals. And again, trust me, tolls probably are going to be in our future, but not right now until we fix our fiscal house, as Senator France had said before.
Any other comment on that question?
Yes, I agree it's going to take a bipartisan effort. There's got to be reforms in the Department of Transportation. The cost structure has to come down. There's got to be more private sector involvement. When I did the emerging markets at work, all of the major infrastructure projects were co-financed and co-founded with private sector money, and that brought more discipline to the equation. And what we do lack is discipline in Connecticut, but if we wait too long, we'll be the last people in the state wondering where the exit is, or the exit ramp is, and that's why we need to get moving forward.
Any other comment on that question? All right, next question, Ms. Costin, excuse me, you're first to respond. 2 questions I'll combine. In light of the recent climate report, how can Connecticut, what steps can Connecticut take to address the issues raised in the climate change report? In other words, what can we do about climate change here in Connecticut?
We are a coastal community, and we in Connecticut have not done very much at all. I think as a local legislator at the RTM level, I have worked very hard to educate myself on all of the issues specifically facing our district. And I'm proud of my record voting on environmental measures. And I do believe that, you know, we as a coastal community need to preserve our our environment. I mean, we've underinvested in safeguarding ourselves from rising sea levels for a long time. And I am, again, proud that I voted for banning plastic bags in Connecticut. That is one environmental measure I am very proud of. I'm proud to have voted to keep fracking waste out of our community and protect our water supply. And I would be happy to vote to ban plastic straws like a lot of the merchants in Old Greenwich have done to try and protect our waterways.
Mr. Camillo?
Sure. Thank you for the question. As somebody who spent about 3 decades in recycling and wrote a bill to expand recycling in Connecticut, the environment is pretty important to me, and always been a supporter of alternative energy sources. Voted for bills promoting solar, but we got to do a lot more than that. There's not enough of that in Connecticut, even in the aggregate, but we still shouldn't stop. We need to move forward on that. And I agree that we've taken some pretty good measures so far. I think I saw Janine Beer-Getz here tonight with the plastic bag issue, and was it Skip the Straw?
Skip the Straw.
Which there's no reason to even have straws anymore. But these are all good things, and we can do what we can locally and at the state level, and I think we do, but we can do more. We definitely could do more, and been very supportive. We see those windmills in West Haven, East Haven. I think we should see more of those. And it's going to be a combination of things, but it's really changing habits and looking at things differently. And I really do think there's probably a lot of bipartisan agreement on that.
Mr. Maskers?
Well, I do like the environment, so I don't know what else I can say on that point per se. On global warming, there's no question that global warming is an issue. My sense is it's more of a federal issue than a state issue. I think at the state level, there's a question in terms of the transition to clean energy or zero emissions. And part of that is going to require us to take an analysis of energy costs. I think I missed the endorsement from the Conservation Society because I was perplexed about a gas pipeline. And I don't want to raise hackles, but my thought is that the energy costs in Connecticut are fairly high, and natural gas is one of the cleanest of the fossil or carbon-generating fuels. So I'm more than willing to see us go to a zero emission over time, but I think in the short term, energy is what drives the economy. So in terms of preparing for global warming, obviously we have to look for those municipal sewer treatment plants, water treatment plants. We have to make sure that we're fortress to a certain extent, and to prepare for the effects of global warming. I'm not sure, other than trying to work towards a goal of a zero-emission clean energy by 2050 or 2075, how we are directly going to impact global warming. So I'm going to revert back to, we need jobs in an economy, and, natural gas has got to be the short-term alternative, and clean energy the long-term, and the technology with it.
Mr. Pacino?
Well, I like the environment, too. But I serve on the Energy and Technology Committee, and I serve on that because I want to make certain that Greenwich is aware of all of the things that are taking place in the state in regards to energy. We've done some great things here in the town of Greenwich, budgeting money to harden the infrastructure like sewer pump stations and things of that nature. And we need to learn from that at the state level. We've passed SB 9, which was an act concerning Connecticut's energy, and it was one of the last bills that we passed this session. It was a very important bill that almost didn't get passed until our Energy and Technology Committee, in a bipartisan manner, went to all of our different colleagues across the aisle and on the same side of the aisle to make certain that they were aware that the program was incredibly important for the state of Connecticut. And I'll tell you, the goal was making changes to incentivize provided certain renewable energies and energy generation. The bills seek to create a balance by increasing the deployment of renewables. Incredibly important for our state. And also net metering was one of the issues that we had in there. We actually, at the last minute, redesigned what we were talking about as far as net metering goes because the language that was submitted was wrong. We did it on a bipartisan manner. So both parties understand the importance of energy, clean energy, clean and renewable energy, and the environment. But some of the things that we have to start doing is we have to start inviting these businesses in who are at the top of the list in these different areas, one of which is Tesla. Let's forget about Tesla's cars. Tesla also develops batteries. Tesla also develops these incredible solar panel roofing shingles. So you take your solar panels off, and you get all of these shingles that interlock, and all of a sudden, your entire roof becomes one giant solar panel. Why aren't they in Bridgeport right now, and some of these lands that where Yale Lock and Key was? Why aren't they there? Why don't they have a manufacturing plant there? Why aren't we going after these companies? Connecticut's always been the forefront of energy and in the environment being number one. But we're lagging behind because we've got these great businesses, we've got this great infrastructure here in Connecticut that we should be utilizing, and we should be getting these companies, we should be getting these companies here so that they can be leading the way for the rest of the nation. So Connecticut is working really hard, and we all are. And we will continue to do so when we're elected back up to Hartford.
Any other comments from anyone on that question? Okay, Mr. Camillo, you're first to respond to this next question. If cuts have to be made in the state budget, excuse me, which specific areas would you cut?
What specific areas would I cut? I would look at things like the delivery of social services and giving it over to a lot of nonprofits. There's a lot of nonprofits we speak to in Greenwich that have spoken to us about this. They are pretty sure they can deliver the said services as good, if not better, than the state at a much cheaper cost. So that's certainly something that I would do. We started cutting back a little bit. When I first ran 10 years ago, we were railing about all these special commissions up there, and a lot of them were duplicative. They did a lot of the same work. We have merged a few of those. I'm not sure how many we need, but certainly, we don't need, certainly, I believe in 2008 there was about 54,000 public employees. Each year we fought, and we've gotten it down to about 43, I believe, now. And that's good. We shouldn't stop there. I think we have to look more to the private sector, get more jobs in there. So, again, I would, there's not, you say, well, I'm going to cut here and I'm going to cut there, but then look what happens in the budgets. We passed a bill in the budget, and we found out the medical savings program for seniors was devastating them. So we demanded to go right back and fix it, and now those 170,000 seniors are fully funded. So it's not as easy as you think cutting across the board, because some sectors really need it and some probably can do without. But again, I would look first and foremost to how we deliver social services. I think we can make a little dent right there too, and get that 43,000 plus number down a little bit more.
Mr. Meskers?
I think the consolidation of government services and consideration of some marginal privatization is called for. I think we have to work smarter and faster and harder. We have to figure out where those savings are. I think the comments on when we went to transportation and we talked about the $700 million in the rail line that was ripped up for a busway, I think the state has to be smarter and clever on how it administers its funds. I think the legislature has to be more involved. From what I can see, we've got a legislature that meets 5 months a year in the budgetary years and 4 months in the non-budgetary years. I think the involvement of the legislature to get more involved with those departments like the Department of Transportation and get under the hood to see what's going on and straighten things out is highly important. So on terms of savings and cost, I don't know if we need to get an external auditor in to look at it, to go to a zero-based budgeting. And I would go back to the issue of if it's that hard to cut, and we're hearing from our current legislator, the second point is that out-of-state toll money would make that process maybe a little more easy in terms of finding resources.
Mr. Pacino?
Thank you. Representative Camillo is correct. The privatization of a lot of these organizations that we have, utilizing 501c3s who would do a much better job at running these organizations and these departments, to me would be a fantastic way of, one, boosting our economy, but two, also making the cuts that we need. Let's look at the Transportation Committee, or Transportation Department. We've got a Commissioner of Transportation, we've got a Deputy Commissioner of Transportation, we've got a Deputy Assistant Transportation, and then we've got an Assistant to the Deputy Commissioner of Transportation. This is wasteful spending. We can make all of these cuts with the right person at the head of the driving the bus. We can make the right cuts that need to be made and create a smaller government that works for the people that understands the needs of every resident in the state of Connecticut. Also, let's look at the Department of Motor Vehicles. I mean, I hate to be a burden on transportation, but come on. We need to privatize that. We need to get somebody in there who actually understands what it is that they're doing. And we need to get people in there, employees in there, who understand it and creates a better environment for the people of the state of Connecticut. There are numerous areas of wasteful spending in the state of Connecticut. We know where they are. We just don't have the opportunity because we're not allowed to get our positions called. Why? Again, 40 years of Democratic majority rule in the state of Connecticut. That's the end of the day. There's your answer. You don't like the blame, but it is just the numbers is what it is. We need complete, utter change.
Okay, Ms. Costin, your response to the question on what areas you would make cuts in the budget if they have to be made?
I agree we need change. So I'm going to tell you something that might blow your mind. Greenwich, Connecticut has a budget committee that looks at costs. Hartford doesn't. That's insane. So if you want to look at how we can make our government more efficient, how about we have an actual committee that works on our budget? The other thing that I would say about cutting costs is I don't believe we can cut ourselves out of our mess. I believe we need to generate new revenue. We need to cut taxes for businesses, bring more of them here. They will hopefully hire again, and we will take in more money in income tax, in sales tax, and use tax. And we will have a thriving economy because Connecticut needs more taxpayers, not more taxes. And cutting our way out is not enough.
Yes.
I don't disagree with all three of my colleagues up here. After we get a new governor every 4 years or 8 years, a lot of our colleagues disappear. You look to your right, your left, they're gone. Where are they? They're serving in positions in the administration. Representative Pacino's right. Why does a commissioner of a department need 3 deputies who make almost as much money as he or she does? It's ridiculous. DMV, one of the worst run departments and agencies probably in the United States, right here in Connecticut. What did Governor Malloy do when we had he put somebody in there, a legislator from Bridgeport, a good guy who he wasn't even on the Transportation Committee, he was a former teacher, set him up to fail, and he did, and it made it worse. What he did is instead of hiring from the outside, and we went to him, we gave him, there were names given to the administration, they hired the second guy in charge. Nice man, nothing wrong with him, but he wasn't thinking out of the box. He was there for all of the major, and nothing has really changed. So we really do need to think outside the box. Do you really need to have legislators sending you glossy color mailings? It's called franking privileges. We've fought and got that down to now black and white and less expensive material. But you should only hear from us once a year. that amounts to incumbency protection. And we've tried to get rid of that. And in this case, Mike's right. We were voted down because we were in the minority on that. You don't need, in this day and age, you don't need to get mailings from us every 3 or 4 months. You don't. There's communications via email. We do office hours. We meet with our constituents. Once a year, end of year recap, fine. But you don't need to, that's something there that we could easily do. And hopefully the next legislature will get some different faces in there and a new governor, and they'll agree with that.
Any other comment on that question?
Yeah, I would both agree with the commentary on DMV. I think that probably needs a heavy rework. I guess that's also easy in that I haven't lived in any state where people like the DMV. And I'm not sure that the function is essentially a government function, since the security guards at the airport are, not public employees. So my view on the privatization would be constructive and positive. But I think the issue is growing and creating a good environment. We need to get new companies into this state. We need to send the message that we're open for business. The biggest problem we're facing goes back to the pension funds, with U.S. constitutionally guaranteed pensions on the Tier 1 pensions that are coming down the pike. So sources of revenue have to be considered. One of them has to be the consideration of tolls to ease the burden to our transportation fund to stimulate the economy. And the second is, how do we ease the tax burden on the corporate rates and on the individual rates to get people to move to this state instead of away from it. I think that's essential.
Anything else on that question? All right, Mr. Meskers, your turn to be first on the question. And the statistics in this question are those of the questioner, so I do not know if they are accurate or not. Deaths due to accidental overdose in Connecticut have increased from 357 in 2012 to over 1,000 in 2017. Is there any way that the legislature can address this epidemic that now takes twice as many lives as guns and motor vehicle accidents together?
Opioid addiction in the United States is a horrific and growing problem. From what I've read on the subject, you've got, and what I've seen from practical experience, is that you go to the dentist for wisdom teeth and you no longer get an aspirin or a Tylenol, you get a narcotic. And the receptors in the brains of people who are susceptible are the beginning stages of addiction. The first thing that has to be done is we need to rein back the overuse and the oversale of opioids in the medication that is provided to our youth and even to the adults in the state. So the first thing is we need to rein in the ridiculously aggressive sales pitch of the pharmaceutical industry to push opioids on every problem you get on a medical basis. The first thing is that. The second is I don't know whether you put an additional tax on pharmaceutical companies for the sale of opioids or where you raise the revenue to provide for halfway houses. And you need to consider that and the further education. I think the problem is horrific. If I had more of an expert background, I would give you, tooth and nail what to do, but we've got to make a start with restraining the prescriptions of opioids.
Mr. Bacino?
So one thing about your Greenwich delegation right now is that on our phones when we're in session, we have Chief Evie, we have Norman Roth, the CEO of Greenwich Hospital, on speed dial. So when we have legislation that comes forward or we're in committees talking about things, we're able to talk to the experts about this. Opioid abuse in the state of Connecticut is horrific. It's horrific around the country. It's horrific globally. Even in the town of Greenwich, to be quite frank, there is a massive abuse of opioids. They have what they call pill parties. And kids take the pills out of parents' or grandparents' medicine cabinets. They dump them into bowls, and the kids come in and they grab a color. That's horrific. In talking with Norma, we've identified a lot of the issues. We passed legislation to make certain that Narcan was available to the ambulances, the police departments. We also passed a bill that says that the doctors are only allowed to prescribe 7 pills for a 7-day week instead of the 30. You hurt your leg, here's 30 whatever, codeine, hydrocodone. That's no longer available. They're not allowed to do that any longer. So we've made strides with the opioid crisis. So your legislature and your delegation has been working hard at this. We've also partnered with the Greenwich Hospital because they do an amazing job and they've got the information. So we go to the people with the information so that we can bring it back to Hartford and we can say to them, listen, here's another thing that we need to address. You need to track the prescriptions that are given. So we put together a database, and the database says, listen, Dr. Smith prescribed this individual a 7-day pack yesterday. So that individual now looks and says, okay, we've got the database, so we know that we shouldn't be prescribing. And that ends it there. But the most important thing, and this we've talked with Stephanie Palmino, who is a strong advocate for opioid addictions and things of that nature, is education is the most important thing we can do right now. Getting into the younger kids and all the YWCAs, YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, and having these talks with these kids so that they understand how bad these things really are. What happened in New Haven, in the Green and New Haven, never should happen anywhere in the United States of America. And it happened here in Connecticut. 72 people overdosed. People got Narcan treatment, were fine after about 4 or 5 hours, and then they went back again. That's horrific. We need to educate these people. We've started that process in Hartford, and if we're elected, we'll continue it.
Ms. Costin?
I think that we should divest Connecticut's pension funds of any company that manufactures opioid painkillers. That's one of the things I really think we should do. Secondly, we do need education in our schools. When I was young, they scared us straight. I remember, you know, in kindergarten, they took us to the police station. They put us in the jail cell and told us we could not see our mommies if we, you know, ever broke the law and got sent to jail. You know, and, you know, later on we were in school and they, you know, they had real drug awareness education and scared us straight, let us know that you could die. You know, I haven't heard, I've got 3 kids in the public schools, and I haven't heard any of them come home and tell me they've been taught about opioids or anything like that. And the other thing is, we don't really have a standard of care for treatment centers in Connecticut. You know, you can go to a treatment center and, you know, be told that you need to pray more, or, you know, you need X, Y, or Z, but there is no standard of care right now for treatment centers in Connecticut for opioids. The other thing is, you know, all insurance plans should cover recovery. Those are.
Mr. Capello?
A few months ago, this is something that's touched a lot of people, probably most of the people in this room, and I went to a memorial service for a young boy that I used to umpire for, just short 10 years ago, and good kid, and we ended up losing him a few months ago, and his mom said, Freddie, do something. And we, as Mike Pacino said, we have passed some really good bills that are going in that direction. You know, the 7-day limit on prescriptions, having EMS workers trained with Narcan. We just attended an event with Norman Roth at the hospital. The gift, all the police officers now have that. But I would go a little further. I know one country, I think it's Switzerland, they deal with this problem. They don't put people in jail. They don't do it. They put them in a hospital, and they try and wean them off of it. And it's supposedly, I was getting information on it up a couple months ago, and it's kind of stopped there. But it seemed to have been working, that you wean them off of them. And it's, for a conservative Republican to say, give somebody drugs, it's kind of hard for me to, but you have to start thinking outside the box sometimes. And if it's working someplace, if there's a blueprint someplace else, it's bad out there. And, when we grew up, it seems like 100 years ago, but we had other problems, but we didn't have this problem. And we have to pay attention to it. We have to pay attention to it. These are our kids, and we're losing them for no good reason.
Any other comments on that question? All right, next question, and Mr. Bacino, you're first to respond. This questioner says he or she is concerned about checks and balances given what is happening nationally. Should I be concerned about it at the state level?
Well, you should be concerned with it at the state level. Honestly, again, I'll get back to 40 years of one-party rule. We need to change things up a little bit. When you have one party in control for that long, they call the playbook, they call the agenda. Regardless of what you heard in the prior debate by Senator Francis' opponent, the majority party calls the agenda. The Speaker of the House is the one who calls whatever bill comes to the floor of the House. The majority leader on the Senate floor calls the bill. The checks and balance is this. We do have an 18-18 split. We do have a Republican Party in the House that is within striking distance of 5 seats. We also have individuals who recognize and understand that maybe these guys, we should try some of their ideas. I'll give you an example. This past session, in January, Republican Senate, Republican House put out a budget. Democrat, nothing. Month later, we get a deficit revenue projection back. $40 million deficit. Republican House, Republican Senate put out each an individual budget. Democrats, nothing. And the cycle continued right up till June. And then the Democrats recognized maybe we need to listen to these guys. Every time there was a deficit, they came back with a restructured budget, many different changes. Maybe we should listen to them. That was your checks and balance, because with that checks and balance came an Republican-inspired budget that helped save the state this past year and put us on the track to fiscal sustainability moving forward, where we can make certain changes, structural changes, like Senator France said, bonding cap, volatility cap, spending cap, things that we've been trying for years. Unions contracts now being voted upon by the legislature. That's a checks and balance, okay? We do work with the other side, okay? We couldn't work with this governor. Thank God he's leaving. And I'm hopeful that we put somebody in place who does not follow his lead. So there is an opportunity for checks and balances. Hopefully you'll make the right decision.
Ms. Costin?
I'm just wondering which specific checks and balances the questioner was referring to.
It does not specify. Just concerned. Presumably, we have 3 branches, so whether the judicial is part of this question or not, I don't know.
Well, I will tell you that federally, we have the Republicans in the White House. They now control the legislature, and now we have
This is the state of Connecticut we're dealing with.
Okay.
You're not the moderator.
I'll address it. Thank you.
Reminding you what we're running for.
Thank you.
The questioner did not specify, so I will take some latitude.
If there were concerns at the state level about checks and balance.
You did not specify state level.
Yeah, I believe I did. It says, I'm concerned about checks and balances, excuse me, checks and balances given what is happening nationally. Should I be concerned about it at the state level?
Okay,
That was
I heard
the
nationally.
question.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's
so
all right.
yes, I will tell you that I believed that the checks and balances of our democracy would keep us safe. But I don't believe that anymore. I believe the state level is where we will be fighting for our rights, including our rights to clean air and water, our right to choose, and our right to common sense gun laws. I believe they will be eroded at the federal level and will be fighting for them at the state level.
Mr. Camillo?
Sure. As a Republican, I subscribe to that theory of local control and states' rights, so of course we all agree with that. But we do have checks and balances. 10 years ago, when I got elected, we were 37 House Republicans against 114 House Democrats. We could almost drive up together. It was that small. There was no checks and balances then. It was so bad, there was 15 to 20 moderate to conservative Democrats, and they would bring out these outrageous bills, the far left of the Democratic Party, and they would let these 15 to 20 moderate to conservative Democrats do what's called taking a walk. It's a cowardly way of avoiding a vote that's going to hurt you in your district. They didn't need their vote, so they would let them do it all the time. As much as I like those 15 to 20 people, it was cowardly. But they would still win. They would still carry the vote by 15 or 20 votes. They can't do it anymore. The state is waking up. The Senate is tied. The House, 5 more seats switches. It is now Republican. Listen, I'm a sports guy. If you have a losing record for 40 years, what happens to the manager? Joe Girardi took the Yankees to win 1 game of the World Series last year and he got fired. This is a constant. The last decade, I call it the lost decade. Why have we not come out of this? Right? You have to start asking the question, why are we one of the laggards in the country? You know, Illinois, Connecticut. Look to the neighbor of the North. They hired Charlie Baker, Republican governor. How did he respond to the Great Recession? 2 tax cuts. How do we respond? Dan Malloy and 2 tax increases. We're never going to get out of it that way. There is checks and balances, and on November 6th, you can be part of those checks and balances.
Mr. Meskers?
As I hear the question about checks and balances given the national scene, and I look at the national scene and I see a $1 trillion deficit that's just come down the pike. And I see a bunch of erosion of basic core values and rights. And I think that I know where I stand on finances. I paid my way through college and graduate school waiting tables. I've gotten to where I've gotten by being responsible with my own money and with other people's money. So I'm comfortable where I stand on finances, and I'm very comfortable in where I stand on social values. I think given the fact that we will be in the fulcrum of an argument on social values at the state level going forward, given the national scene, I think it's as important to vote and to show up to vote and to make your voice heard. And that's why I've been out campaigning. That's why I've been talking to people. And if you look at my record of community service, and if you look at my record in the finance industry, you can pretty much figure where I stand on those values.
Any other comment on the question? Ms. Costin, did you have something you wanted to add?
I would like to just say, you know, I hear a lot of complaining about Dan Malloy and about how our legislature functions, and I would just like to point out that I can take no credit or blame for that. I think we do need a new governor, and I think we need a new government.
Okay, it's time to move to closing statements. You each will have 2 minutes, and if the timers will let me know when they're ready to go. All right, it's 2 minutes apiece, and Mr. Meskers, you are the first.
Well, to those of you who don't know me, as I said in this meeting, I've got a 35-year career on Wall Street focusing on international banking and fixed income markets. I worked my way through school. That background, along with an undergraduate degree in economics and a master's in finance, I think they give me the skills to address the long-simmering problems that Connecticut faces. We have serious problems with our pension system, which starts with unfunded liabilities and includes a risky and poorly thought out system of pension benefits that were never funded. There's been a lot of finger pointing tonight. Let's not waste time trying to ascribe blame. The situation we are now in requires independent thinking and analysis and some difficult choices. We need to think smart, we need to think fast, and we need to adjust expectations on the full funding date of those pensions and adjust expectations of what our public sector employees can expect. We've got many tough decisions ahead. Our transportation system is antiquated. In order to attract and retrain businesses, we need to improve our roads, bridges, and rail lines. That spending is necessary and is stimulative. We need to eliminate tax breaks, flatten our corporate tax rates, reduce personal taxes as soon as possible, and stop the exodus of companies and residents. I want to reduce regulations, reduce permitting, and reduce the marginal tax rate on new hires and new companies. Let's send a message that Connecticut is open for business. We need to send someone to Hartford who is a businessman with an understanding of finance. I ask for your vote this November 6th. Let's get Connecticut moving in the right direction.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Buccino, you have 2 minutes as well.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women and everybody for coming out tonight. As a former small business owner and the ranking member of the Labor Committee, I know what needs to be done as far as bringing in new businesses to the state of Connecticut. We first need to lower the corporate income tax on these businesses. Inevitably, yes, phasing out the income tax is a wonderful thing. But right now, we need to understand something, everyone. There's been a 40-year Democratic rule, and the only reason why we're where we are right now is because it's so close and Republicans now have the voice. Imagine what happens when we take majority. Imagine all the good that we can do for the state in a bipartisan manner. In a bipartisan manner here in the state of Connecticut. The opponents to the delegation continue to deflect to Washington politics. They continue to have alternative universe that they live in when it comes to some of the issues that we're dealing with here. Here are the issues. We have the opportunity to elect a new governor that will work with businesses. We have the opportunity, conversely, to elect a governor who wants to raise your property taxes, to double it, to instill a statewide property tax. We can't afford it in the town of Greenwich. We can't afford it in Fairfield County. The Greenwich delegation has worked very, very hard. We brought back $24+ million in the New Lebanon reimbursement to the town of Greenwich, one that Dan Malloy said never would happen. We invested into the Medicare savings program. We refunded the teachers' retirement plan. We've done the work. We've done the social things. We've dealt with opioid crisis. We've dealt with gun laws. We've dealt with women's health issues. Don't tell us that we haven't done our work. We've done a damn good job and put us back up there, and I guarantee you this because you can ask anybody, I don't lie. We will continue to do a good job.
Thank you.
Real results,
your time
real
is
representation, that's your Greenwich delegation.
Thank you. Ms. Costin, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate and to everyone who came out tonight. It has been my life's work as a journalist for 20 years to observe and objectively report. I can objectively say to you that our fiscal problems will consume us if we don't act. We need change. We really do. You won't find this Democrat on the Dan Malloy apology tour. I can take no credit or blame. I was not in the room for those problems. But I can tell you we've had more of the same for too long and no material improvement in our fiscal situation to show for it. I have knocked on a lot of doors this campaign. And when people ask me why I'm running, I tell them my top 3. I'm running because we need to fix our economy and make sure that people want to live in Connecticut and they want to work here. Our state needs more taxpayers, not more taxes. Number 2, I'm running to protect reproductive rights in Connecticut because with the stroke of a pen, that could all change. Number 3, I'm running because I really believe we have more work to do on our common sense gun laws. We are an open carry state, and to me, that is unacceptable. There are far more than 3 reasons why I am running. because there are so many opportunities for us to fix what's broken. And I can tell you that on every doorstep I go to, most people say thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, because this is a critically important time. They know that this is not easy. They know that I am stepping up because I care. And I cannot sit idly by. So now I thank you, and I will ask for your vote.
Mr. Camillo, your 2-minute closing statement.
Thank you. I want to again thank the League and Kay for moderating tonight, and my opponent and my colleagues. 10 years ago, I was here, and I looked out everybody, and I said that when I knocked on my 4,000 or so doors, that I wasn't coming at the voters, I was coming from them, because I grew up here. They know me. I go to the same places now that I did 35 years ago if they're in business. I have the same friends. I've started a couple companies here over the years, and I was a teacher, a banker, a broker. And I'm most proud of being a lifelong volunteer here from age 18 to now, still on a lot of boards and commissions. The last 10 years in the legislature, I have written, introduced, and gained passage of several laws in public safety, consumer protection, economic reform, the environment, commerce, and animal welfare. I am the Assistant Republican Leader. I founded and I chair 2 bipartisan caucuses, and I'm a member of many more. But it's not really I, it's we, because the seat does not belong to me. It belongs to the people of the 151st District, the district I grew up in, and the district that I love. And I answer to you. I'm only the temporary voice. I asked that you send me up there to be that voice for 2 more years, respectfully and humbly. It is a great honor to work with the Greenwich delegation, who got in so many reforms last year, and the only minority party-inspired budget in the United States of America was here in Connecticut. That was your Republican Party there. So that means that we can work together with people. And you know what? There are a couple of times I did even work with Dan Malloy. But our delegation can work across the line. And please, God, if we win and we're in the majority, we will treat the Democratic minority with as much respect as we treat ourselves, because that's the only way you'll get something done. You only have your word, and that's your bond up there. That's all. Once that goes, you'll get nothing done. I've been blessed to work with my Greenwich colleagues, my Republican colleagues, and my Democratic colleagues across the aisle. Thanks, God bless, and see you out in the district.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for being a courteous audience, and thank the candidates for their time.
Fantastic job, Mike. Check that blood pressure. You did a great job. Steve, good job.